Okay, in this short video tutorial, I'm going to walk through the steps for clipping out a portion of a raster data set. So this tutorial assumes that you've gotten to a point where you have brought in and classified and built your NDVI raster layer that we're seeing here on the screen. And now what I want to do is is isolate everything within this pivot or this field and exclude everything else. So I'm going to use a clipping process to do that and create a new raster in that process. So the first thing I need to do is establish a boundary that I want to use for the cookie cutter to cut out this pivot area. And so what I need to do is create a new feature class. So I'm going to go over to my database, which I'm using to store the information in for this particular project. And I'm going to right click on that database root, and I'm going to go down to new feature class. So I'm going to build a new feature class with inside this geodatabase with inside my farm. So I'm going to give it a name, and I'm going to call this maybe pivot or field boundary. Okay, and use underscores. Don't put spaces in the naming conventions if you can help it. You can put an alias in here if you want to say pivot underscore boundary for clipping, whatever you want to do in there, that's fine. The next thing you want to do, and this is important, you want to change this from polygon because it's always the default. You want to change that to line feature class because we need a line feature class in order to use that to cookie cut out the raster area. I hit next. It's going to ask us to build a projection. This is going to be the projection of our project. All right, so this is, in this case, we've determined this is the state plane Washington South coordinate system, so we'll check that, hit next. Now everything else in this dialog box, just use the defaults. We don't need to worry about anything else here, so we'll hit next here, we'll hit next here, and we don't need to add any more fields here because we're not really using this boundary to manage information or do anything, so we just need the shape in order to use it to clip out the raster. So we'll just hit finish. So at this point, it adds two things. It adds the new pivot boundary with its line work, and it's kind of hard to see. So let's increase that, and let's change the color to bright red and hit OK, and then make sure that we can see that. Oh, right. And so we're ready to see that, but there's nothing in this feature class yet, right? It's just a empty feature class waiting for me to put some data into it. So the next thing I want to do is right click and say edit feature and start editing. Now I need to have the create feature tab open up here on the right. So if it's not visible over here, if you don't see it, on this editing toolbar, and let's go back here. So if I don't have the editing toolbar up and running, I need to right click out here in the toolbar section and bring up my editor toolbar. And then on that editor toolbar, I can turn on this create features dialog box. Okay, and then what I want to do is highlight the layer that I want to edit, and down below it'll give me options for what construction tools I want to use to build a feature. And I want to create a circle. All right, it's going to be a line circle, not a polygon, because I'm constructing lines only, because we can see that from this graphic here. I'm working with lines, but I'm going to create a circle, a closed circle representation of the line boundary. So I'm going to pick circle. Now it's very simple. We do this the same way we do our selections and our measures and things like that. I'm going to put my mouse right over the center of the raster. I'm going to click once on my left mouse button, and now I can drag this this representation. You can see the symbology that it picked up from what I chose in the table of contents, and I can drag that circle out to about where I want to clip it, and then I double click the left mouse button. So one click on the left mouse button starts the activity, and then when I'm ready I can double click or hit F2 to stop the execution. And now I have a line feature within my pivot boundary feature class. And right now it's highlighted, so it has that cyan shape to it. But as soon as I say edit, stop editing, and save my edits, we'll see now it reflects that color and thickness of that line work that I did over here previously. So I'm done with the editing tool. I don't need that anymore. And now it's time to clip out the raster. So that's a tool that's located underneath your system tools. So go to your toolbox and open up System Tools, open up the Data Management toolbox, and then scroll down to Raster Tools. And inside Raster Tools, there's a raster processing toolbox. And in there, there's a clip. And so I want to clip this out. So I'm going to double click that, and it's going to bring up this dialog box. So my input raster is going to be my original NDVI raster layer. My output extents is going to be that pivot boundary feature, all right, that feature class right there. Leave all these alone because the system's calculating the extent that's going to be needed to create the new raster. But what I do need to do is check off this box to say use input features for clipping the geometry. Okay, and the next important thing to do is to make sure I'm in the right geodatabase, and then I want to give this a name. So I'm just going to open up this box, and I'm going to make sure that I'm in the right spot. So I'm in my farms, my AgRed Northwest, I'm in my geodatabase, which is perfect. And there's my existing raster that's already in there, but all I'm going to do is rename it to clip, right? Or give it a different name, right? This is now my field 1 or pivot 1 raster or whatever you want to do. So I can say pivot 1, or let's just do this. Let's say this is my NDVI for pivot 1 and hit save. So review. I've got my original raster. I got my pivot boundary, which has my new feature, my line feature representation of the boundary that I want to use to clip. I've checked off this box, given the name and the right geodatabase. Leave everything else alone. Hit OK, and this will run through the process. This shouldn't take long to process. You should get a nice yes, successful execution of that. And we see now our new raster here called NDVI_pivot1 built into our table of contents, as well as if I go back to my catalog and go back up to my geodatabase for that, you'll now see, and there I have my boundary feature class and my new NDVI pivot 1 raster. And so at this point I can turn this one off. I can leave it in here if I want to, and then I can go back and right click and go properties and symbology, and we can do several things here. I'm just going to go ahead and use the default stretch, grab my values, invert, hit apply, and now we've got just the raster representation for my boundary pivot. If I don't want that anymore, I can actually turn it off. I can remove it from my table of contents. It's still part of my geodatabase. I haven't lost that feature, but now I'm only working with data inside of that polygon. Now, at this point, you should probably do this step first before you create your points, because now we've already limited everything outside of that clipped area. And now when I create my points to represent my yield, I'll be sure to only work with things inside that area. And then I can render this any way I want to for a visual representation of what's happening there. So that takes care of that.